Welcome back to the Ben Zion podcast. I'm going to talk about some um, techno-optimists, as they're sometimes known, end-of-year predictions, and other very rosy predictions for the role of advanced computing in changing civilization. This is always going to be a problem because the assumption that these mechanical Turks, um, um, even if they are in fact more advanced than anything we've seen, are going to end serious structural problems rather than exacerbate them is this is the essential lie of the techno-futurist. And if you don't believe me, you can find any person, any one of these techno-optimists, or any liberal, any person of the capitalist class. They're no different. They have different things that they might want to discuss, but the worldview is fundamentally the same. Find them and ask them uh, why they think that the United States, which has 4% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners, why they think that's the case, um, or why they think that the movement to abolish prisons because of this racism in the 2010s was eclipsed and supplanted by populist movements and ridiculousness that ensued. The United States is basically almost uniformly coming to the conclusion, even arch conservatives were conceding that for-profit prisons and these kinds of structures were not serving the American people or anyone's interests. But then a bunch of private prison lobbyists and other kinds of people like this paid for a huckster named Donald Trump to suck all the air out of the room for any real conversations, so that we could just always talk about Donald Trump and how this person who's no different policy-wise from um, the person who followed him, Joe Biden, almost exactly the same point on the political compass. They've done exactly the same things, but how this other guy, Donald Trump, is the fascist, and Joe Biden is the anti-fascist. All of this framing of things is all designed to trick you into thinking that to not thinking about any serious issues at all. And you won't find technologists in the U.S. and in the West who are not all happily accepting all of these assumptions, happily accepting this kind of world, happily accepting that these people are almost uniformly neoliberals. They believe that greater privatization will be better. One of these people, David Shapiro, an idiot, he routinely repeats this when he's talking about AI, and he knows a lot about AI, right? A lot more than the average person. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter that he has a strong understanding of programming and the systems themselves, because he's warping all of that to fit this elitist worldview. And ask any of these techno optimists in the U.S. why they what they think the reason is for the United States not having a public health service, where other countries in the imperial core may have something approaching that. Why is this neoliberal mandate in this one particular area that kills 100,000 people a year during a pandemic, and before that about 70,000 people a year? Why is this? And this is the same answer to why we have this outsized prison industrial complex. It's the same answer to 100 others, and that is these whites are cutting off their nose to spite their face. They'll harm their own relatives and themselves to a certain degree if they can see that a greater degree of harm is done to black and brown bodies. That is his essential answer to why some imperialist countries have a public health service and the U.S. does not, to keep black people down, to keep brown people down. And you won't find scarcely a single person of who's an AI bobblehead who's interested in this sort of thing, who's a tech accelerationist, who doesn't happily accept all of these systems as just a fact of life, something that we have to try to work around. And that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit, the so-called working around here. Um, uh, so uh, this the principle. I think it's a cliche, but it's reasonable to say that this idea that garbage in, garbage out is a pretty fair way of looking at things, and that is the what you're doing when you're saying these advanced computing systems are going to improve something without making fundamental changes, without supporting fundamental changes, revolutionary changes that would be necessary to the system. Um, there's really no other way of looking at it. Um, well, but I'm going to talk a little bit about what David Shapiro said in his. David Shapiro is a YouTuber, has a pretty large number of followers, and as I said, um, he's in certain sense a lot of what he says is ridiculous because he's saying every 6 months that artificial superintelligence will be here in 6 months, and then he'll say that again, and when it doesn't happen, he'll say it again for another 6 months. So that's a little weird. But he is, I think, in a very, very, very limited sense, a person who is looking at what should unfold in the course of the 21st century. Um, but again, it's completely worthless if it's when it's filtered through this essentially State Department propaganda. Um, you know, people, started to try to get close to some people like this community of what Timnit Gebru calls a TESCREAL, transhumanists and others like this. Let's say techno-optimists. And everybody would say, oh, this such and such person is really intelligent. Such and such person is really has an interesting perspective. And I would say, okay, let's hear what they have to say. And it would be a person more or less with the same kind of modus operandi as David Shapiro, a person who, if they has about as good of understanding of the world around them, except in this very limited area of their technical expertise, as the average 5-year-old would in China. A 5-year-old would have more political literacy than the average tech genius in the U.S. That's these are people, So if this person has a complicated view of the world in one narrow technical area and a completely worthless view in all of the things that would hold it up otherwise, is this an intelligent person? Are you to believe that this is an intelligent person? Or do you believe that, or are you to believe that something needlessly complicated is going on in their mind that serves no function? If you don't believe that that's true, consider that all of these great geniuses of the West are all goose stepping us up toward capitalism's climate apocalypse. Okay, so is that an intelligent person? A person who is conspiring and accepting their own demise? Is a person intent on committing mass suicide and forcing everyone else to mass suicide an intelligent person? None of these are intelligent people. They're people with complicated worldviews, uh, complicated crypto-fascistic worldviews. Um, and so some of the predictions have a kernel of truth to them. Um, um, but what will actually come of any of this? One of Shapiro's predictions is AI making healthcare for profit healthcare systems more effective. This is something he's talked about before. But you don't have to look very far to see that automation has been used by capitalists and by neoliberals in the course of the 20th century to um, exacerbate human misery, to exacerbate the U.S.'s quasi-apartheid state, to maintain this structure of white power in just with more steps, right? They can't just, there's a famous quote from a Republican strategist, and he says, in he uses hate speech. He says, in the 1950s, everyone would just say, insert hate speech for African Americans here, and then in the 1960s, it became passe for politicians and people who were public facing to use that kind of language. But that didn't change their strategies in the slightest. They just started talking about oppressive systems in sneakier ways. So they talked about busing, and they supported redlining, and they supported stripping black and brown folks of the necessaries of life, including just the very basics of education. The education system was sabotaged in this way, and we say, "Oh, what a shame that people aren't getting the education they need." All of that was intentional, and it continues to be intentional. So when somebody says that AI in healthcare is going to improve healthcare, um, um, they have no basis, in fact, for thinking that, because similar improvements in automation have been weaponized against people. Uh, you know, you would find people who would, in certain respects, be regarded as arch conservatives in the early 20th or mid 20th century, who would say, well, we think in 100 years' time, um, uh, even under capitalism, no one will be working. No one will have to have a job, because when we see all of the value that's being added to the economy because of automation, it's very hard to imagine that um, people won't benefit from it. There won't be a trickle down effect, so to speak. Um, so these were people who were serious thinkers in the 1950s and 1960s, saying this, capitalists. But that's not. But those people didn't exactly imagine the degree to which the professional managerial class would strip that value away from working people, create institutions and structures that kept it from them, and built up this billionaire class, soon to be trillionaire class, right? So anybody like David Shapiro who's talking about these things as transformative, the only transformation that's happening is that transformation from a billionaire to a trillionaire class, further immiseration of working people, and hastening the destruction of the environment. Um, uh, I don't recommend that you watch David Shapiro's show. It's dog shit for this reason because but this person is the most typical transhumanist and tescrial this group of people broadly we could call techno-optimists a worldview. Um, Again, these are not intelligent people. These are people doing complex crypto-fascistic maneuvers and sophistry. Um, um, he thinks that artificial general intelligence, which would be effectively human superintelligence, right? Artificial general intelligence is computing that is able to do the work of a human being, but it doesn't sleep. It can be reproduced in great numbers. So artificial general intelligence is effectively the arrival of human superintelligence, and I believe that I agree with him that this could occur within a short number of years, maybe even in 2024 for all intents and purposes. Um, but again, that is going to be hastening environmental destruction, absent revolutionary action on your part, absent revolutionary organization, and a real challenge to the techno fascist West and the techno fascist USA that's emerging. All that is going to amount to is more death and devastation. Look at what is happening in Israel right now. There's a drone which has other genocidal capacities as well, flying over Gaza, over a certain area of Gaza. That's giving people a message, no doubt, in part written by AI itself, yelling at them to move from their home. So this is something from a Terminator picture, a drone screaming at you, telling you to leave your home. But it's not the Terminator. It's the fascist West. So the U.S. Look at what have been the fruits of this the 20th century technology that was all developed on the public dime. It was all developed by initially by the investment of public funds, and then it was systematically privatized, and it became somehow became accepted it was the property of triple billing defense contractors, warmongering pigs, and so they've developed all of this that could have legitimately improved humankind into um, into weapons of war, like just described. Also in Israel right now, and anything that Israel does, you should basically just assume that it's the United States doing it, right? Could just be described as one giant U.S. military base. It wouldn't exist as a settler colony if it weren't for U.S. defense contracts, very kind, fascistic kind that I was just describing. And they're also using AI to plan this this depopulation and these other genocidal acts, removing of the population from their homes, murdering them in great numbers. What would you call killing 10,000 small children in the course of 2 months? Um, um, it, Using advanced technology, if not something like a Terminator type scenario. This is all that the United States has ever done is stealing from its own people to build out this billionaire class. You know, You can read works like Vijay Prashad, The Darker Nations, or um, um, Vincent Bevan's The Jakarta Method, and you can see in great detail the description of destabilization of entire continents to this for this purpose, in killing 40 million people in your lifetime or in living memory in anti-communist wars. This it's there's no possible way of looking at the United States and thinking that something good is going to now come of all of this that's been done so badly before, all in service, always in service to private wealth and to the detriment of working people and the basic functioning of a humane and sustainable economic system. Right? Because it's very, very, very bad to kill 40 million people in anti-communist wars and sabotages. It's very, very bad. But then to the victor going the spoils in this case, the victors being fascists, U.S., the United States is fascist. What are the spoils? Well, then they get to kill the whole planet. That's their reward is for killing tens and tens of millions of working people. Is then being able to kill the whole planet. That's effectively what's happening right now. We're looking down the barrel of capitalism's climate apocalypse. No one is willing to challenge the world's worst polluter itself, the United States military industrial complex. No one sees a path to bring either disassembling it or bringing it to heel in any way. And so it does its job. It continues to do its job of of upholding other super polluting organizations, all corporations, or private public partnerships between corporations and other imperial nations. Um, um, all of there is no effective path to not murdering the whole planet. This is all the result of the United States, and it's not only in militaristic terms. Much of neocolonialism is the result of course, IMF and WEF style organizations imposing austerity methods and basically trickery. The United States basically whole job, aside from just murdering people in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, has just been basically cheating at Monopoly, disassembling and neutering other people's economic policies domestically, other countries, to such a degree. Just and again, has it benefited the U.S. citizen? The U.S. has a lower life expectancy than Cuba now. Has it benefited? Who has it benefited? It's benefited the building out of this billionaire class. It's benefited the killing of the planet. Um, and there's the idea that artificial general intelligence is going to have really any chance of changing that on its own. If it's not taken back by the people, is it's laughable because all of the people who design these things have no interest in structural change. They don't even have the language to describe the failings of the system. They don't even when they change the subject. When you say, well, why does the United States have 4% of the world's population and 25% of its prisoners? They change the subject when you say, well, why did the United States kill this number of millions of people in Vietnam, this number of millions of people in Korea, and then kill this number of millions of people in all the wars since Iraq and so forth, adding up to 40 million deaths in our lifetime? Why was this done? Why is this? Why are you denying this anti-communism that's central to these organizations that you work for. And so, if the people who are building this are fascists, how could the result be anything but techno-fascism? One of the articles delved a little bit more into the idea that digital assistants, these mechanical Turks, are going to change the world. So let's talk let's talk a little bit about that. Um, so a lot of people who are regarded as important people in technology, which a lot of them are people who invest in technology. That's not how it should be, but that's how it is. If you have put money into AI and are willing to talk about AI in a public-facing way, then you are regarded as a great source of wisdom for this. A lot of these kind of people are talking about how we're going to have as a essentially free good um, a variety of professional services, and so not even things beyond ChatGPT, ChatGPT 4, 3.5 that you're able to use for free now, but things that would say be more like something from the Jetsons, humanoid robots becoming commonplace in the next few years. Um, but I'm inclined to think, and again, that none of this, what are the smartest robots being used in the world now? They're killer wolves, they're robot dogs, and these kind of drones being autonomous warfare is. Insofar as autonomous systems are being used, they're being used for war, and that war isn't a just war. It's the oppression of historically marginalized people. It's the oppression of the colonizer upon the colonized, and um, as, so do you think that you will have greater access to professional services due to AI? Um, this and what is its impact? What is the impact when you have free doctors, lawyers, and tutors? Um, um, this um, I've said this before in 1800s and 1900s. Um, there were a lot of farmers, a lot more than there are today. Today, this is one of the most fully automated of fields. And how did that process occur? Did all of those sharecroppers and serfs become independently wealthy? It's almost a question that you would laugh at. Those people remained sharecroppers and serfs, but not working in that occupation. They just became, today they're just unhoused people. Their descendants are unhoused people. So the world peasantry was shifted out of the stable, although not extravagant lifestyle that they were living in, and their field itself was stolen, automated by for-profit systems that have grown wealthy because of this. And the people who worked in that received nothing, not even so much in the United States as an effective safety net system to take care of them. And they were blamed for having been the victims of theft. So look at this happening in the course of the 21st century in this form. Is that going to somehow change this modus operandi of capitalism, or its far right version of today, neoliberalism. Neoliberal systems have their tendrils in everything in the United States, and they are worse than the capitalists who converted um, farming systems into full automation. They are worse. They have less concern for the welfare of human beings. Um, the the when we say we're looking at an unlimited kind of AI capability, the only question you should really be asking is unlimited in for whom? Who you know the unlimited growth from the billionaire class into the trillionaire class at the expense of not just yourself in your economic affairs, but the very existence of the planet.